Salman Rushdie is here. He's one of our most acclaimed and influential writers working today. He has written 12 novels, 4 works of nonfiction, and a collection of short stories. He won the Booker Prize for second novel, Midnight's Children. He was knighted by Queen Elizabeth in 2007 for services to literature. His new book is called 2 Years, 8 Months, and 28 Days. It is his first novel for adults in 7 years. I am pleased to welcome him back to this table. Welcome.
Hi, how are you? Nice to see you.
It's good to have you. The last book was a memoir?
The last book, 3 years ago, memoir. Yeah, and I've been doing this ever since. In fact, I just worked out, which kind of spooked me, when somebody asked me how long did it take you to write this book, and I started working it out, and it worked out to be more or less exactly 2 years, 8 months,
and 28 nights. Yeah.
And so somehow it took me 1,001 nights. That's what it is if you do the math.
How do you decide what you want to write?
I wait for it to decide me. I wait for the book. I'm in between books. I try all kinds of things, and most of them disappear and aren't any good after 24 hours. But sometimes an idea sticks. And I had a couple of things here to start with. I had this idea of genies attacking Manhattan, which I thought might be enjoyable. And I had this image of this man who is a gardener suddenly becoming unstuck from the earth. I thought, if you're somebody who spent your life nurturing the earth, and the things that grow in it, and you suddenly wake up one day and you discover you're an inch off the ground, that's a shock. I thought maybe it could be like a little Kafka story of somebody waking up and they're a cockroach, an unexplained metamorphosis. And initially I thought maybe it would just be his story, and then it grew outwards from there.
You also said you get sick and tired of telling the truth.
Well, that was the memoir, because I spent all that time trying. The memoir is the longest book I ever wrote. There's like 650 almost pages, and
was it cathartic for you?
It was a bit. It was a little bit like getting a monkey off my back, and drawing a line under the past. And I just thought, if anybody ever wants to hear about those 10 years, read this 650-page book, and then you'll be sick of it, like I am. And really, by the time I'd finished it, I wanted to be the person to tell that story, and I told that story. And then I thought, I'm going to go back to the thing that first made me want to be a writer, which was to write fantastic tales, because I came out of an Indian tradition in which you grow up surrounded by fantastic tales. And I thought, maybe I'm going to bring that tradition over, since I've been living here for whatever it is, almost 16 years. I thought I'd bring it over here.
Is one easier than the other?
No. This is harder.
Because it's got to come out of your imagination?
Yeah, because, if you're writing a memoir, you know the plot, and you know all the characters.
Yeah, but here too you can do interesting things, because you have a fable, but it's also dealing with contemporary issues.
Yes, exactly. You're trying to take a kind of sense of what's going on in the world and try and make it into, turn it in from the base metal of, it's alchemy. You take the base metal of the world and you try and turn it into gold. And it was very interesting, very enjowhich to do, I have to say.
What issues are you addressing?
Well, obviously at the center of the book, there's this what's called a war of the worlds, in which these supernatural beings are attacking the earth, and we have to defend ourselves. And I think it is a time of extraordinary conflict. But I think beneath that, I think it's a time of great uncertainty. The thing that happens in the book is that all sorts of characters, like the gardener who comes unstuck, find that very strange things are happening to them. And it's called the time of the strangenesses. And what I felt is that that's a way of saying that we live in a time in which I think many people feel the world has become very strange. It's changing at very, very high speed in all kinds of unexpected and sometimes not at all attractive directions. And I think many people feel we don't know what's going on, except that the old rules, what we thought were the rules of the world, that don't seem to apply anymore, and we don't really know what the new rules are.
But you also say it's a series of love stories.
Yeah, there is a whole sequence of love stories in it, which starts off with at the heart of the book is the woman who's the main character is this jinn princess, who loves human beings, unlike others of the jinn who don't. But she does, and in fact, she starts off in the novel by falling in love with. The jinn live almost forever, so they're very, very long-lived. She claims to remember the dinosaurs, which may or may not be true. But anyway, she lives a really long time. And in the 12th century, on one of her visits to this world, she falls in love with a philosopher in Spain, really a historically existing figure who's known in the West as Averroes, but in the Arab world as Ibn Rushd, which is where my name comes from, because my father admired him so much that he changed our family name to honor him.
Oh, wow.
So Rushdie comes from that. And so I became interested in him for that obvious reason. Anyway, she falls in love with him because, and I did too in a way, because in his time, he was the progressive voice. You know, he was the Aristotelian philosopher. He was trying to shift the way people thought in the direction of reason and logic and science and tolerance and away from blind faith. And, you know, he had his problems too.
There are many interesting things here in terms of you argue for a kind of a union of reason and unreason too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you know unreason. I mean, it's too easy to say that reason is good and unreason is bad, because out of that irrational self, I mean, comes like what I do for a living. Come the arts. You know, they do come out of a marriage of the rational and the irrational, and that's what in his famous etching, Goya was trying to say. He was trying to say when these two things come together, they create marvels. They're the parents of the arts. But when they're separated, they bring forth monsters.
Yeah, I mean, the Ibn tried to introduce logic too, did he not?
Yes,
science,
he did.
The sort of the
yes.
he was the coming together of science
he was
and
a great
reason
admirer,
and logic and
he was a great admirer of Aristotle, and his commentaries on Aristotle afterwards became incredibly significant in European thought. You know, philosophers like Thomas Aquinas and the Italian Renaissance humanists, you know, were very influenced by him.
You say another interesting observation is that you've made is that terrorism is very attractive to especially men who have real problems with sexual relationships.
Well, it's a kind of joke in the book, but it's a joke with a little edge, I think.
Because of what, you know, well, because I mean, how they have.
Well, I think if you live in a world where you're broke and you have zero prospects and you feel put upon, and it's easy for you to believe that that's somebody else's fault, and
then somebody comes along with an argument that you will have everything you want.
Yeah, here's a gun, and you will have women because we will provide them for you.
Yes,
you know,
in the next life.
No, even in this life. Even in this life.
Actually, part of ISIS is that.
Yes, that's right. They're kind of importing. The thing that baffles me, which I don't get, is why the women go. I mean, I can see where the guys go.
Longing. I mean, I would assume it's all the sort of simple reason it is to belong to something, some sense of feeling a connection somewhere. There's some romance to it.
And the propaganda.
Their life is boring.
And the propaganda is very good.
Yeah, right. That's right. The lure as propelled forward, while maybe unreal, is also compelling for somebody who's.
So here you've got. I mean, in this case, I decided to turn it into a supernatural war, but clearly it's an attempt to say something about, you know, the world we're in.
What's next, though?
Me after this? You know, I don't know quite yet. I mean, I do. One of the things I think is that I've always felt a little regret that I hadn't written more short stories. You know, because I've done one book of short stories and a few other things, but I feel. I mean, right now I've got 4 or 5 files going with stories of different lengths. I mean, like some of them are only so far a couple of pages long, and some are 15 or 20. But I just think I might write some stories for a bit.
So you have 3 or 4 stories going at the same time?
At the moment I do, yeah.
But do you do that normally in your life? Have you had that?
No, normally
I would think that would be very difficult.
No, I'm an very bad multitasker.
You need to focus.
I'm a one thing at a time guy.
Yeah. But you are doing this now in terms of.
I'm doing this because it's kind of fun. Also, you know, because this is a passage. You know what a book tour is like. You have not that many silent days to yourself, and it's not a time to begin a big project. But it's a time when I can squeeze in a few little things.
But are you thinking about big projects?
Yeah, I've got one. I've got what I think is I don't know what it is yet, though. Yeah. I'll come back and tell you.
You don't want to know or you don't want to disclose? Which would be acceptable.
No, it's not formed yet. I have parts of it, but I don't really...
beginning to feel like it might emerge as something.
I feel like sometimes you have the feeling that there's a fish on the line, you know, but you don't quite know what the fish is or how big it is.
Yeah, it hasn't surfaced yet.
No, it hasn't.
The struggle.
Yeah, but it's down there.
Are writing skills, could you take in your own life experience, could you take a bright young person who was very much observant, very much interested in the world around them, perhaps even spiritual to a degree in the broadest sense of that, and make them into a good writer? Is there a way, or is there some essential quality that one must have?
There's a thing you can teach, and then there's a thing you can't teach.
So what are they?
What you can teach is craft. You know, I mean, that a lot of writers can be taught how to do it better.
Right.
You know, and you know, how to make your sentences
and
sharper.
What is that? Making the sentences sharper?
Yeah, paying attention to form, making sure that the shape of the book tells the story.
The command of language, all that?
Yeah, no, the things I think you can't teach is that I think everybody who's a really exceptional writer has some very personal relationship with the English language. You know, I mean, if you think about Hemingway or Joyce, or etc., you immediately know that it's Hemingway or Joyce when you pick up a page. You know, and
do you see it in conversation?
Not always. No, I don't believe Hemingway spoke like that.
I don't either. That's my point. Yeah.
I don't think he did. But I think there's a thing. Certainly for me, I know that when I'm sitting down to write, my mind works in a way that it doesn't otherwise work. You know, the kind of noises that come out of my head and onto the page, just in the act of writing, are different. I mean, I don't write in the way that I'm talking to you. You know, another thing happens, and I think that's the kind of magic thing. And I think that if you've got some interest, I mean, like Raymond Carver, anybody you think of, you know, has very particular relationship with the language. And the other thing is, I think what you said earlier, the thing is very hard to teach is the ear. You know, because you
see, that's what I actually right. I was going to say that point. I mean, I think writers have also, the best writers have this marvelous sense of recall for experience and observation,
and how people talk.
Yeah, and mimic how people talk.
You know, I mean, I think you should, one of the things I've said sometimes to students is when you write a page of dialogue with two people talking to each other, it should be possible not to say who's talking, not to say he said, she said. Just from the way they talk, you should know who's talking. And that, you know, I mean, I've always start with all these people.
Interesting idea.
With all these people, with all my characters, one of the ways I start with the characters is to think, how do these people talk? Are they talkative? Are they taciturn? Do they use bad language? How big is their vocabulary? You know, once you've made a number of decisions about how a person talks, you really know a lot about that person. You know?
I think for myself, I've been a verbal person all my life.
Yeah.
And so I tend to be able to articulate and say and express myself better this way than sitting and saying one sentence after another.
No, difficult. It's very difficult. I think, you know, I actually think I'm quite a verbal person, and I enjoy expressing myself in dialogue like this, you know, but writing is the hardest thing I know how to do. And especially when it's a book like this, which is supposed to feel, you know, the great Italian writer Calvino named what he considered to be the great literary virtues, and amongst them were qualities like swiftness and lightness, which are very hard to do. So if you want to write a book that reads as if it's light, that reads as if it goes quickly, but actually has depth to it, that's the hardest thing I know how to do.
How do you do it?
Well, you do it, and then it's awful, and then you make it better, and then it's still quite awful, and then eventually you crack it.
By the time your books go to the editor, they need much editing?
They don't need much, but what happens to me is I don't show work in progress because I find I'm too nervous about it. It's too fragile. But when I've brought it to a point where I think, okay, I'm not really improving it here, then I get very interested in what other people say. You know, and I'm not saying...
Is it primarily your editor, or is it a whole,
editors, but
group
also
of people that you trust
friends,
their judgment and they'll be honest with you?
Yeah, what you need is people. What you need is people who tell you the truth. You don't need people who pat you on the back and tell you you're wonderful. You need people who say, "I got bored in that bit," or "I got confused over here," or "I wanted more explanation or something."
Exactly.
You know, that's what you need. And I'm not saying I always do everything that people say, but it's very useful guidance. And if 2 or 3 people who read it say the same thing, then they're right.
Yeah, I see. So if you hear it 3 or 4 times, you know,
then they're right.
You know, they're on to something.
Yeah,
if they
exactly.
say,
Then fix it.
Yeah. And you know how to fix it.
Well, you find out how to fix it. But the great thing, I mean, I think actually the greatest publishing editors always had the brilliance that they would be able to put their finger on the problem. They would say, problem here, but they wouldn't tell the author how to fix it. You go away and find out.
They just say, this is the problem.
Here's the problem.
So the best do not say, here's the problem and this is what you do. They simply say, this doesn't work.
Yeah, you know, I got snarled here. I got, you know, you lost me here.
Yeah.
You go away and find out how to fix that. That's your job.
How long does it take you to write a book normally? I mean,
you know, it's...
And is a memoir different than a...
The memoir is faster, no question. It's faster. I mean, I talked to other people. I talked to Martin Amis about it. He said, you know, he thought it was about twice as fast writing a memoir as writing a novel.
Twice as fast?
Yeah, and I think he's about right. The memoir, you know, it's very long. It's over 6, by far the longest book I wrote. And it just poured out, just came rushing out of me like a torrent.
Meaning it had been contained and all of a sudden...
like a dammed up flood,
exactly.
You know, just came out. This takes long. I mean, look, I've 3
So would you sit at a typewriter and just go? I mean, you'd hear just
well, in
at
the
a
case,
computer.
well, the case of a memoir, you know, I had a lot of journals and so on, so I had records to help me. But with a novel, you don't have anything. You've got nothing until you make it up. And I mean, I've 3 times in my life taken 5 years to write a book. Midnight's Children, Satanic Verses, Ground Beneath Her Feet, they took 5 years each. The Moor's Last Sigh took 4 years.
That's 25 years already.
Yeah, Moor's Last Sigh took 4 years. I mean, some, you know, like Haroon and the Sea of Stories took a year, Fury took a year. This one took 2 years, 8 months, and 28 nights.
Yeah. The issue that brought so much terror to your life is now sort of as wide and as it's unimaginable.
Well, it's everybody's problem now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's sad, but true. I think
it's everybody's problem.
It's everybody's problem.
It is on the highest. It is at the top of consideration.
Yeah, and I think, you know, almost
what has to be dealt with.
Almost all of us will think about it at some point every day. You know, if we're at all plugged into what's going on in the world.
It's good to have you here.
Very good to be here. Always.
This book is called 2 Years, 8 Months, and 28 Nights, a novel. Salman Rushdie. Thank you for joining us. See you next time.